A sea salt caraway bun topped with salty, medium rare roast beef, then a bunch of horseradish and a bunch of au jus. That's the beef on WECK sandwich from Buffalo, New York, and I'm pretty sure it's the best roast beef sandwich in the world. And today, I'm gonna show you how to make one. To get started, we need to make the namesake roll for this sandwich. That's the WECK, or more formally known as the Kummelweck Roll. Essentially, we're making a really nice bun with a bunch of crunchy, flaky salt and aromatic caraway seeds stuck to the top. So to mix the Kummelweck dough, I'm gonna grab my stand mixer, and into the bowl of that, I'm gonna measure 125 grams of warm water, 3 grams of instant yeast, 35 grams of sugar, 75 grams of roasted and then mashed russet potato, 50 grams of melted and then cooled down butter, 300 grams of all-purpose flour, and then 5 grams of salt. Now the dough hook goes on, and I'm going to mix this on low speed like I always do for about 3 minutes, or until the dough has started to come together into a cohesive mass like this. From there, the speed's going to go up to high, and I'm going to mix this for 6 more minutes until the dough is clear in the bowl and slapping around like this. Now, to see if we've developed enough gluten in this dough, I'm going to give it a tug to see if it shears and or tears, and it does not. From here, I'm going to flip this into a medium bowl and then come back and tuck some additional strength into the dough by turning it like this into a nice taut round ball, and there we go. The lid goes on, and I'm going to move this bowl over to a warm place, in this case on top of my refrigerator, to rise for 90 minutes while I get the beef part of this beef on WECK sorted out. For that, I'm going to grab a sizable chunk of beef from the fridge and then preheat my oven to 550F 287C. For this sandwich, I've chosen an 8-pound or roughly 4-kilo beef knuckle roast. I went with knuckle here because it's lean and has a great irony beef flavor, which is perfect for roast beef. But if you can't find beef knuckle, any 8-pound lean roast from the back end of the cow would be a good option. Just ask your butcher. Now, to get this roast oven ready, I'm going to clean up the exterior by removing any silver skin or excessive fat. We're going to be cooking this roast to about medium rare, and that level of heat won't be enough to meaningfully render any of the fat on the outside, so it needs to go. Once it's all trimmed up and this roast is looking good, now I'm going to lift this out of the sheet tray and then lay down a sheet of aluminum foil. I'm going to top that with a wire rack, and we'll see why this foil is necessary in a few minutes. Next, I'm going to squeeze some neutral oil all over this roast and then spread that out evenly to get full coverage. This oil is going to help the seasonings adhere to the outside of the meat, and more importantly, it helps transfer heat more efficiently to the meat when we oven sear this in a second. Next, I'm going to liberally season this roast with salt, like a lot of salt. The outside of this meat is the only part that's going to have any salinity to it, so we really need to go big here. After that salt comes black pepper, and you guessed it, be liberal. For the same reasons, we need a bunch on the outside here. In my opinion, salt and pepper, aka the Dalmatian rub, is all that this roast beef needs to taste good. Once it's all rubbed up, I'm going to load this into a 550F 280C oven to sear it for about 15 to 20 minutes. And if you've got a fan on your oven, now would be the time to turn that on. After 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to pull out that roast and then turn the oven down to 300F 148C, and then leave the door open so that this oven can cool off a little bit quicker. Remember that foil that we laid down earlier? Well, 550F is super hot, and now it's covered in burnt black pepper and a bunch of over caramelized beef stuff that would burn later on, so now we got to get rid of it. Now we've got a clean slate for all those flavorful beef drippings that are going to land on this when it cooks at a lower temperature, and I'm going to be using those for our sandwich jus later on. Okay, let's keep cooking this meat. The oven's at 300F 148C, and now I'm going to load this roast back in and cook it for about 2 more hours. While that roasts, I want to get the base for my au jus made up real quick, and for that I've got a small saucepan here, and I'm going to preheat that over medium heat. Once that's all heated up, in goes 30 grams of butter, and I'm going to get that all nice and melty, and once that's bubbling, in goes 20 grams of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to whisk that until a nice paste is formed. Now we've got a roux. I'm going to continue to cook that for another 20 to 30 seconds to get rid of any raw flour taste, and once that roux is just starting to take on a little bit of light golden brown hue to it like this, I'm going to add a strong splash of beef stock. I've got 500 grams to go in total here, but I'm only going to incorporate about the first 100 grams of that stock up front to prevent any clumping. After that first little bit is whisked in and it comes up to a simmer and it's starting to thicken like this, in goes the rest of that stock. Again, that's 500 grams total. And this is just run-of-the-mill store-bought beef stock, by the way. Like I said, this is just an au jus base. We're going to be fortifying this later on with some really intense beef drippings from our roast beef, and we don't really need super gelatinous, flavorful beef stock as a starting point. I'm also going to add in 15 grams of Worcestershire and a tiny little dollop of better than bouillon beef paste. That's about 3 grams or so. I've explained why I love BTB beef paste in a previous video, Italian beef. I will link to that below. And if for some reason you're opposed to high quality beef concentrate like this, feel free to skip it. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Now I'm going to bring this whole thing up to a simmer, and once it's bubbling like this, we're going to turn the heat down to low and reduce for about 10 minutes to fully integrate and concentrate all these flavors. After that 10 minutes, we're going to take this au jus base off the heat and then scoot it off to the back side of the stove to hang out while we finish everything else. Let's check on the buns. It's been about 90 minutes now, and this dough is looking all gassed up, buoyant, and alive. Now I'm going to flip this dough out onto my cutting board. I'm going to grab my gram scale, and then using my dough scraper, I'm going to cut this dough into 6 100-gram size pieces. Once these are all cut up, I'm going to grab a little sheet tray lined with parchment paper and then grab some pan spray. Straight olive oil will also work if you don't use pan spray in your house, but in the restaurant we use pan spray for literally everything, and I just started using it at home and I'm kind of into it. Now to shape these buns, I'm going to grab a little piece of dough and pull it out on both sides. Fold those over each other, then flip the dough over so that it's sitting on those folds. From there, I'm going to use the palm of my hand and my fingertips to roll this into a nice, taut little ball. That looks good. From here, I'm going to move this over to my sheet tray and then shape the other 5. Once I've got all 6 buns shaped here, I'm going to move this over to the cutting board and then cover it with another sheet tray so that these can proof up for 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the temperature of your house. While those rise, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, Shaker and Spoon. Shaker and Spoon is a monthly cocktail subscription box that sends you ingredients to make craft cocktails at home. Each month, you get a box that's centered around one spirit. I went for the rye whiskey and mezcal boxes. In each box, there are recipes and ingredients to make 3 different cocktails, and each recipe makes 4 drinks. That's 12 cocktails per box, and you get to bring your own spirit. To try these out, I used some mezcal that I had on hand to make the abstract distraction cocktail, and I added the infused strawberry jam, the rose lemonade, and the lemon bitters that I got from Shaker and Spoon. I shook it up, served it on crushed ice, and then topped it with the dried rosebuds that they sent for garnish. It was totally delicious, a little bit tart, and super aromatic from the smoky mezcal and all of the infused rose. So to give this a try, click the link in the description, use the code Brian at checkout, or go to shakerandspoon.com/Brian for $20 off your first box. A box would be a great gift for somebody that you know who loves cocktails, or it's just a fun way to entertain some buddies who also like cocktails. That's shakerandspoon.com/Brian, or just click the link below and use the code Brian for $20 off your first box. Thank you, Shaker and Spoon. 90 minutes later, these rolls are looking great, and I know they're ready when I give them a poke, and the dough ball takes that poke and then gently pops it back out. I've tried really hard to time this so that the roast beef is ready to be checked right about the same time as these Kummelweck buns are ready for the oven. It's been about 2 hours since this beef went in, and now we're going to determine the doneness here with a digital instant read thermometer. I'm going to measure 2 parts of this meat. First, the center, that's 120F 48C, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. And then secondly, the outer level to see how cooked it is around the edges. That's 135-ish, give or take a degree. That's also perfect. Since this is such a large piece of meat, it's going to continue to carry over cook as it sits, and the hotter outside is going to penetrate and cook the inside more, and after about 30 minutes of resting, it's going to be the perfect medium rare throughout. Now, I'm going to turn this oven up to 400F 204C for the Kummelwecks. Also, I'm going to top this roast beef with some foil loosely, move it out of the way, and then grab the buns. I'm going to hit these with some egg wash real quick. That's just 1 whole egg that I've whisked up. Sometimes I like to add water to my egg wash for a nice shiny glaze, but since we're going to be sticking seeds and salt to the top of these buns, we need a little bit of a thicker viscosity. Speaking of seeds and salt, once these are all egged up, I'm going to give each bun a liberal dusting of coarse flaky salt. Next goes down caraway seeds, and do these to taste. The flavor of caraway is necessary in my opinion. I really love it, but if you do not, add less. Once these are all salted and seeded, they're going to go into a preheated oven to bake for 15 minutes. As I cut to this time lapse, I want to remind you guys to bake these dark. They're going to look way cooler and they're going to taste way cooler. After 15 minutes, when I pull these out of the oven, you guys can see these are some very attractive looking buns. I wish you guys could smell that combo of a fresh baked bun and all that toasty caraway. It's quite dope. But if you're asking yourself, hey Bri, I can get behind roasting my own beef, but I'm probably not going to make my own buns. Can you help me out here, dude? Totally. I bought some simple, effective Kaiser rolls at the grocery store to show you how to do just that. I'm going to mix some water and cornstarch together here, quantities in the description, along with the whole recipe and the volumetric recipe, by the way. Then I'm going to bring all that to a simmer and cook it till it's thickened, take it off the heat, brush some of these Kaisers with that mixture, and then add on my salt, my caraway, and then throw it back in the oven to bake for 4 to 5 minutes to set that starch. And there you go, the DIY but not super DIY Kummelweck. Enjoy it. Now, let's make a sandwich. Back to the beef. Let's not forget all that roasty, intense, salty beef juice just hanging out under this roast. To harvest it, we're going to grab a wooden spoon, scrape up the fondue bits stuck to the pan, and then get those all dissolved in the juice. From there, we're going to pour that into the jus base that we made earlier, give it a taste, I think this needs a little bit more salt, and there we go. This should yield plenty of jus for the 6 buns that we made, and probably will leave you with just a little bit extra to spoon over leftover roast beef. Now, I'm going to move this jus over to the stove and put it on low heat to keep it warm for sandwich time. And now I'm going to grab my roast beef and get it set up for hand slicing. To do that, I'm going to put some rubber mats under the sheet tray so it doesn't slip around. I'm going to grab an auxiliary cutting board. I'll grab a plate for my beef to land on, and then I'm also going to get a filleting knife. For this type of work, I really do recommend having something that is this thin and very sharp. I'll throw a link in the description to the one that I'm using. It was about $30 and it's super effective. The first cut here is going to be across the top to remove the first few inches of beef. This part is totally usable and delicious, but since it's close to the outside, it's going to be more medium well looking, so save that for someone who prefers a little bit less pink. To slice this, I'm going to start on one side with my knife fully parallel to the roast and then gently work my way to the other side with an up and down motion. I am definitely not trying to replicate a mechanical deli slicer in any way with this movement. I'm really just trying to shave off what I can as thin as I can. Doing it by hand like this is actually how they do it in Buffalo, or at least that's how it looks on the internet, and the Wexmen and Wexwomen who put together these sandwiches take great care to make sure that they're not stringy or tough and that they have the right thickness throughout. Part of the art of building a sandwich like this is paying attention to the slices that you're getting. If you get a sinewy bit, cut that out, or if you get a too thick piece, cut that down into smaller pieces. That way you won't get an overly tough bite. Once I've got 6 to 8 ounces of hot roast beef, now it's time to build the sandwich. First, I'm going to slice my Kummelweck in half, then I'm going to carefully shingle on my roast beef. This is a very simple sandwich, so you guys know that how we layer it matters. Try to get that beef spread evenly for structural integrity, and if you see anything too thick, go back and cut it again. On top of that beef comes the horsey sauce, maybe 2 tablespoons of that. I like to go generously here. And real quick, to make this sauce, I combine 100 grams of mayonnaise, 75 grams of sour cream, 100 grams of prepared horseradish, and 1 gram of salt. The immersion blender goes in, and I'm going to puree all of that to combine. And a quick note here on prepared horseradish. They're definitely not all created equal. On the left, I've got a shelf-stable version, and on the right, I've got a prepared horseradish from the refrigerator section. In my opinion, the shelf-stable stuff tends to be way less fresh tasting. It's kind of acrid, and it's usually way too sour. So if you're making this recipe, you might need to use 50 grams instead of 100. The refrigerated stuff is way sweeter, it's way more in focus with horseradish flavor, and it's not going to blow your head off with acidity. Now, the final touch is to dip this top bun in my jus and then lay it on top and give everything a little squish. Wow. Before I bite this, I like to set up a little dip station with my beef jus in a ramekin, and look at this jus. You know that's very beefy, right? Look at this stuff. You guys, I think all of you need to make a plan to do this one very, very soon. Invite some friends over, set up your carving station in the middle of your kitchen, hand cut everyone their own roast beef sandwich one at a time, and then watch their faces as they realize all of your power. Let's eat this thing.